Hello. How are we doing? It's a great crowd. This was told to me like, we're not sure if there's going to be like 2 people or 4 people, but it's a lot more than that, so it's great that people showed up. We have a great edition today. This is unfolding tomorrow by AVP and Aalto ES. Today we're talking about SDG 13, so climate action. My name is Antti Heiskala. I'm going to be your host today. I'm also an impact entrepreneur myself and an organizer or a community member in this kind of impact entrepreneurship community called Wicked Helsinki. Go look it up. Today we have a great set of guests from very different perspectives. So I'm super curious what we're going to find out today. So we have an activist, Lea Lintula. We have Niklas Koskela, Chief Impact Officer at Compensate. We have Rika Mäki-Koskela, Head of Radical Creativity from Aalto University. And then lastly, we have Saara Hyrkkö, a Member of Parliament, a Vice Chair of Green Parliamentary Group, and a member of Espoo City Council. So can we get a big hand for our guests today? Wow. Amazing. How do you get these people? Where do you find them? That's amazing that they have all of these different perspectives in one group. I think it's not super common, at least. But today we're going to hear a few keynotes, a few presentations. I'm not entirely sure what we're going to hear, but I think it's going to be interesting stuff. And then we're going to have a short panel discussion about topics that you can propose, and then if you don't propose anything, we'll make something up. So I wish all of us a great evening, and I'm happy to be here myself. And the first presentation is Saara Hyrkkö, is it? It's Niklas Koskela from Compensate. Perfect. Welcome, Niklas.
I would call myself a climate activist. Been working especially in civil society pretty much all my career, and also I'm the founder of a climate organization here in Finland called Protect Our Winters, or the Finnish chapter of the International Protect Our Winters movement. But let's see if we get our presentation going. I'll pour myself some water. Yeah, if you can go to the... Can you go to the first slide, or? Yeah, all right. So I already introduced myself. I won't say too much about Compensate. Perhaps in the panel we'll get into that, but I'll talk a bit more about who's responsible for the atmosphere. Basically, we treat the atmosphere as an invisible dump site for our lifestyles and our societies. Every one of us emits CO2 into the atmosphere every single day, every single moment through our actions and our choices and the way we structure our societies. But that dump site where we dump our CO2 and other greenhouse gases, it's invisible, we don't see it. So we have trouble taking responsibility for it. We just keep adding more and more without realizing the impacts that has. And I'm going to focus my presentation on who should be responsible, and hopefully by the end of the talk you might get some ideas on that as well. Sir David Attenborough held a speech, I think was it yesterday, at COP Glasgow. I'm heading there in a couple of days myself. And he started his speech with saying that there's really actually only one figure we should think about when we think about climate change. That is the level of CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. And he's completely right. I mean, the fact that we have too much CO2 in the atmosphere is what is causing climate change. We've surpassed so-called safe levels of CO2 back in 1988. I don't know how many of you were born. I was already born by then, but maybe not all of you. And since then, what we've done is we've just as humanity continued to add more CO2 in the atmosphere. So even radically reducing emissions right now, even if we were able to halve all global emissions overnight, we would still have a huge problem with too much CO2 in the atmosphere. So we're past the point when even radical emission reductions are enough. We also need to start removing the historical emissions that we have already put up into that invisible dump site that we've created. So you all know these figures probably if you follow climate change news. We're in a hurry. We need to halve global emissions by 2030 and reach global net zero by 2050. So these are the commitments we have basically if we want to, or these are the measures we need to take globally if we want to reach the Paris Agreement goal of 1.5 degrees. And the theme of COP this year is how do we keep 1.5 degrees alive. But if we look at what has happened historically, we're nowhere near on the right path yet. Global CO2 emission levels have gone up almost constantly until the pandemic hit about 2 years ago. And last year we saw a drop of 6 to 7% of CO2 emissions globally. And you can see that it was a huge change. We pretty much closed society for several months in many countries, even longer, and we got this dip in emissions. But now we need to maintain that level of CO2 emission reductions annually every year for the next decades. And if I would have had the latest figures, that line is going back up again. So we're nowhere on the right track. If we look at the figure that really matters, the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, and maybe a graph that you've seen plenty of times before, we're already 50% above pre-industrial levels. And if you remember 350 being that safe level, you can see when we surpassed that as well. So basically all the promises that our world leaders, all leaders have made doesn't show in CO2 concentration in the atmosphere yet at all. It's still rising. We're reducing emissions, but because the way the atmosphere works, the CO2 concentration will continue to rise. So I hope you keep this in mind when you listen to what people and our world leaders are pledging in Glasgow. It's nowhere enough. So that's a gloomy picture, right? It doesn't sound too inviting, especially to a young person. But I also think the change or the future is still in our hands, and we can really affect that. And I'll go back to the responsibility, who is responsible for all this later on. But I just wanted to give you a few examples of how we've changed, what seemed to be impossible before. I don't remember the exact quote from President Niinistö, but he said something quite interesting yesterday at Glasgow. He said something like, change seems impossible until we undertake it. So many other things have seemed impossible earlier, but we still have a chance. And there's no technological reason or financial reason why we don't reach the Paris Agreement goals. We just need the will, and especially political will, to make it happen. So, having been in the climate sphere for a long time, people often ask me, so what should we do? Do we need structural changes in society? Do we need politicians to take a bigger role? Do we need businesses to advance technological solutions? Do we need individual action or collective action? Do I need to fly less or eat vegetarian food? Should I switch to an EV? What should we all do? And these are very, very valid questions. But I think my answer at this point, we need all of them. We should stop arguing amongst ourselves what actions we should take, because we need to take actions on all levels. We need to take actions on individual levels. Businesses need to take action. Politicians need to take action. There is no really hiding from that fact. We're so far in this climate crisis already that we really need action on all levels. And this brings me back to, who is responsible for the atmosphere? We all are. I think that in order to achieve the big changes we need in society, we need to think about what prevents us from acting. What makes us, what blocks us from taking action? And I think one of the biggest blockers we have is actually in between our ears. We don't understand that we all need to take responsibility. How will abstract institutions like governments, states, municipalities, businesses, universities, how will they take action unless the people who make decisions in those institutions understand their responsibility? We're in this climate crisis because we shift responsibility always to someone else. If I'm a consumer, I'm shifting the responsibility to the business who's selling me some product and saying that you're not selling me a sustainable product. If I'm a business, I'm saying that it's consumers who are deciding what to buy. I'm just, providing a service for them. If I'm a politician, oh, it's China's fault because their emissions are so huge. There's always someone else who's responsible. And I think fundamentally, this is something we have to acknowledge, that this cannot continue. And that's why I think one of the biggest blockers is in between our ears, and we need a mindset change. And that can lead to bigger structural changes in society. I'm not an advocate for individual action as a solution to the climate crisis. But I'm saying without this mind shift change, we will never achieve the necessary structural changes we have to undertake in society. All right, I'll leave it here so we have time for other speakers as well. Thank you.
Good to be here. My name is Saara Hyrkkö. I'm a member of the parliament and also a former student of Aalto University, so it's really nice to be here after a long time. I thought I would say a few words on how we ended up where we are today. And my perspective is obviously the perspective of politics and governments. And politics is sometimes very frustrating, very slow. But however frustrating it is, we have actually come a long way to this day. As a member of parliament, I have the privilege to work alongside with some of the long-time champions of climate battles. My colleagues who have been pushing this agenda for decades or trying to raise awareness and debating on the urgency of climate action. Obviously, to balance it out, I also get to work with the loudest critics and strongest opponents of science-based climate politics, but that's, I guess, how things go. But somehow I think it helps to hear from the perspective of those long-time champions. It's not because I would enjoy hearing that we could have taken action already years ago before climate change became a climate crisis, but more so that it reminds me of how long we've come and actually how things have already changed. And we have finally reached a point where countries and cities, one after another, set their own climate targets, where communities and companies take climate action, and where even the Pope talks about climate emergency. Still, there is so much left to do, and despite all of the good development, it's still freaking hard to get the necessary decisions made on a political level, whether it's local, national, or global decisions. So I guess one of the questions I want to ask today is, how did we get here? What changed before, and how can we make that happen again? How can we make this year the turning point of climate politics once again? So one important milestone in recent history was IPCC's special report in 2018. For those following climate science and climate politics, the report wasn't really a surprise. When we already had the Paris Climate Agreement, we sort of knew we had to take action, but somehow the report woke the people. So the report spoke very clearly about why it's absolutely vital to maintain the global warming below 1.5 degrees, and then things started happening. So shortly after the report was launched, Finland made the decision to ban the use of coal in energy. That same year, Greta started striking, and Fridays for Future, the movement, was born and started growing. And I don't have any data for it, but I sort of feel that even the media started covering climate issues more seriously. And all these three aspects are needed in order to get the change we need on a political level. It's obviously first and foremost our responsibility as politicians, as decision makers, to do what's right, and in this case do what's necessary, even if it wouldn't be the most popular thing to do. But obviously if people support it, it's a little bit easier to get the decisions made. And I mentioned one of the sort of grand gestures that was made in Finnish climate politics in recent history, the coal ban. Political decisions like this are obviously very important. They operate as drivers for new solutions. They draw the framework for all of the society and sort of give an idea of what is and what is not possible in the future. And at its best, impact of climate policies starts way before the actual due date in innovations and investments and research. And how lovely would it be if we could sort of implement big decisions like the coal ban one after another. Unfortunately, that is not the case. But it's partly because of lack of political will, obviously, but also partly because the rest of the puzzle is a bit more complicated. As Niklas said before, we need actions on all levels, on all sectors. We need them in energy, we need them in industry, we need them in traffic, we need them in agriculture, and on all levels, local, national and global, individual levels as well. So here's a picture of how people think, what are the most impactful sort of things we should do in climate politics, and what's actually the impact of those things made. And this is why sort of the views of the people and what actually should be done in politics are not always hand in hand. So what should be done then, and what is done at the moment? The current government in Finland has committed to make Finland carbon neutral by 2035 and carbon negative soon after that. And as we've all read from the news, it's easier said than done. However, half of the decisions needed are actually done. Even though it's always spoken that nothing happens in politics, and politics is slow and it's hard, still we managed to get step by step, little after little, half of the decisions that are needed. And a few months ago we actually agreed on the wide range of new decisions that are aimed to close the gap needed for the remaining half. Now there's debate ongoing on whether these decisions will be enough, and that's why we are counting on science to tell us to evaluate the credibility of the decisions. And if more are needed, then more should be done and will be done. Often the hardest decisions are the ones with the most concrete consequences for individual people. Maybe some of you have followed the discussion about meat and dairy, or the price of gas. These are good examples of the political discussions being right now. And recently also a discussion about peat, so turve has become one of these. But it's also a good example of why we need to support people in the midst of all this change. We've agreed that we need to get rid of turve peat because it has very, very high emissions, and we've set some goals for it. Now we know we will reach those goals way before they were meant to happen, which is obviously a good thing for climate, but obviously the people who get their livelihood from those things are worried, and even more people are sort of sympathizing with them. So in a situation like this, a politician can go one way or another. The wrong way, in my opinion, is obviously telling people that, okay, we don't need this change. Everything can go on as it has been for now and before. But the right thing to do would be to tell people that change will come, it's necessary, but we'll support you. And to make sure no one is left behind, that people are supported and heard and informed about what's going on. There's a lot of concrete steps that are being taken on a national level, on a European Union level, on a global level. Obviously, the expectations for Glasgow COP26 are very high. Maybe I won't go into detail on those decisions now. We can go into them in the panel discussion. But I want to end with a few thoughts on the two other aspects mentioned earlier, the media and the people. A journalist from Helsingin Sanomat made a point earlier this week about why getting politicians to make the necessary decisions is so hard. And he posted this poll made by Helsingin Sanomat, and it showed that nearly half of the people are not ready to compromise their living standards for climate change. And it's true, this is why it's hard to make those decisions. It's not only in elections that people impact the minds of decision makers, but still, maybe what I get from this picture is that something is very wrong with this. And another journalist, Rika, gladly pointed it out. This is what's wrong with the picture. The question is wrong altogether. This should be the last poll that gives people the chance to choose between how things are today and how things would be if we take climate crisis seriously. Because obviously those are not the options. My very strong wish would be that the media would start posing the questions properly, where people would be asked whether they want to face the future where the climate crisis did hit us hard, or the future where we actually took action and managed to stop climate crisis on time. So I won't talk more about how to get the support of the people. It's obviously necessary, but we have expert on that side here as well. But I will say this from a politician's point of view: the support that we politicians get from businesses, from research, from activists, from people of all ages, from all backgrounds, all around the world. It's crucial. We should be making the decisions just based on science, just because we know it has to be done, but we can't do it. So we do need the support. And myself, I find hope in the people, or in the different ways that people manage to turn their anxiety into action. So politics can be very slow, too slow, some might say, but I do believe in the mixture that I've presented here. I do believe in that political will can be found with the support and pressure from the people. And because we know that change is not optional, it's inevitable. Every up-to-date CEO knows it, every credible scientist knows it, every student knows it. And so finally it's up to us, both the people using their voice and their democratic superpowers, and first and foremost, obviously, up to us decision makers to feel our responsibility and sort of pave the way for sustainable change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So my name is Rika Mäkikoskela, and I think tonight I am representing Aalto University here in these discussions. I'm very pleased to be here. I came here on a very short notice, but still I think that the topic is so intriguing that I wanted to come and see what you guys are doing here. My fields are visual art and visual arts education. So my background is a little bit different than the previous speakers. But I think that we, as this kind of a diverse group speaking tonight, is the diamond here tonight as well. I also have a researcher background. I have worked 8 years as a researcher in Aalto University, but now I'm working as a head of radical creativity. I think it's a little bit risky to say in a university that there is so much knowledge that we have nowadays. And this is not the kind of like the problem at all. We have so much research-based knowledge on sustainability as well that we should know what we should do. But still we don't do it. As you have heard tonight, that we should take action now. From the 70s we have known what to do, and the researchers have known also that quite well. But I think as a researcher that there's a gap between our thinking and then doing and making. But I think in Aalto University we are very good in making and doing things. I think this is our identity, so I'm not worried at all. The reason I have been making research on circular economy is that I believe that no one can do sustainable change alone. Even me, I as an artist can have an influence on that. In Aalto University we have a new strategy, and we have 3 cross-cutting approaches in that strategy. And one of them is radical creativity. The second one is entrepreneurial mindset, and then the third one is sustainability solutions. And this combination is quite unique in a university. We don't know any other university working like that in the world. I think radical creativity is a very important part in that combination, because creative practices can enrich the ways to create sustainability solutions. For example, we can visualize and experiment pilots. We can vision the future, maybe a more sustainable future. And if we have enough knowledge, but we still don't take the action, what is the gap between there? It's our behavior. And I think that when we do and make things in Aalto University, sustainability solutions, that can be the way for a more sustainable future. We have many things going on in a university at the moment. I want to mention a couple of them. For example, Design Bits MOOC. That's an open online course for everyone, not only for the Aalto community, but for everyone in the world. You can participate and learn creative methods. You can learn problem solving, you can test, you can experiment, and you can try. You can take action, but the environment is safe. You can use your imagination and take some tests, and then maybe think that, okay, if this works here, can it work in the world outside of the university? The other example I want to mention here is the Cooler Planet exhibition that we have. The whole name is Designs for a Cooler Planet. We had it this September, and we will have it next year as well. At the moment we are thinking about the themes for the next year, and the School of Arts and then the School of Engineering are quite active in that exhibition, but we still would like to have all the schools participating in that exhibition to create sustainable solutions together for us. So I would like you to consider this possibility, to think about that. What are your designs for a cooler planet? Could we see them in September in that exhibition? Thank you very much.
Hello, good evening everyone. I also came here with a very short notice, so I don't have anything to show you. I'm sorry about that. I'm here today as an activist. I'm talking about Extinction Rebellion, And this is only my view of the movement. This movement is global, so I can't talk about everyone who's acting in there. I'm just talking about my own perspective in the movement. So, here we go. I started to be part of the movement a year ago when I read the IPCC reports, which I hope that everybody reads. I know that at this point we have to rely on science, and we know there's a lot of science we can rely on, and this is the place where individuals come to a point where you might get anxious. You might feel like there is no point to even try to find ways in your life to lower your carbon footprint. Like, what does it matter? You see that the world is looking like it's gonna be dystopic. And for me, taking a part in a movement has made a big changing my mind to see how we are in this whole system, how we are not only individuals, but we are really cool group of people, and we are here to support others, and all the activists before us, and all the great politicians who have made all the hard decisions for like women to be able to even stand here, have made the road for us to go there and have our voice out. And that is my tool to work in this democratic world. And as we have heard in these speakers from before, it's a very important tool also in democracy to raise your voice and say that where you stand. Because the anxiety that the system takes on us is taking many of us down. And I have been in that point where I have thought that maybe the politicians are not gonna make it. Maybe there is no point to even try to raise my voice. What does it matter? And all of this. But when we come together, we have the power. And I want to be here to inspire all of you to find your expertise and your voice to really see that even in dystopical times we can find some great love and community around us, and that is really taking us to better places. And if we go to better places with ourselves, we can share it to others, and that's how we're gonna make new systems around us. So I think myself more as a system changer. I'm also working as a visual artist, but I have noticed that it doesn't feel like it's taking me further, or it's not really helping the system this quick as we need, because we're in the situation where the next 10 years are very radical. We have to make decisions now. So really me making art and trying to talk about community and love doesn't really always get so far. So I have took a part in Extinction Rebellion, and I was thinking to tell you a bit information about this movement, because many of you might know it, but as you know, media has a lot of voice in our lives, and there are also these different kind of pictures we get from there. And so about Extinction Rebellion, it is a rebellion that it's against life-destroying structures. It has started in Great Britain with the name Extinction Rebellion, which was established in 2018. And right after that few months, it was already established in Finland. So we can be proud of that as Finnish or living in Finland, that we have been quick with this movement as well. And as you might know, it has grew a lot in Finland as well in the past few years. And the global movement now also includes hundreds of thousands of people in 84 countries. So it's the largest climate movement in the world. Elokapina, which is the name of Extinction Rebellion in Finland, declares climate emergency in Finland, which in some political issues caused that it's not made in Finland, even though we have all the signs of crisis around us. We demand that the situation will be dealt with the seriousness that it requires, and this is the government. We are not talking about individual things in here. We are talking about government to make actions and really talk about what's happening and not keeping it silent in the parliamentary house. Elokapina as a movement uses self-reflectiveness, renewable and democratic ways as a movement. So if you take a part in the movement, you can really see that it's making its structures all over again and again, and so it's a bit hard to know how does the movement work. And this is a way we are wanting to find new democratic ways also in bigger systems to see how the systems really work and how can we make other ways that everybody's voice are heard and people feel like they have power and voice. We are encouraging in the collective working and also respecting others in the movement. So it's very important, I think, in many levels that we do this kind of work where we are seeing ourselves not only individuals but as a part of collective and find more places in this world where we are really staying in places where we want others to be safe, and we want to give space for feelings that are everywhere. We have a lot of anxiety in this world. We have all this pain and fear. So this is very important for us to make space in this world for these feelings, because we're gonna face some hard times, and this means that we need to have places where we are sharing all of these emotions. This is more to the government. Yes, thank you. So we have known about the climate warming and its dangers for decades now, and still barely nothing has been done to the issue, as we have heard from many other speakers before. The emissions are still been rising, and from the past, and climate keeps on warming. There are now many politicians in Glasgow talking about this, but still, even though you might see that they are not listening to science. We live in a world that is working like there is no climate crisis. We might have this kind of meeting and conferences, but there are no realistic actions taken. So, as a human, I myself, I can hear that they are speaking there. I can hear all the conferences and speakers, and I can hear all of you speaking here. But the nature, that doesn't hear that. It needs actions. And actions is what we're here to do. It is not the point anymore where we talk about things. It's the time where we have to make big decisions and acts. And this is where we rely on politicians. They have to have the courage to make big decisions at these times where we are going to meet a lot of new places where we're going to stand on. And also, this is one way to hear that what we could do is to hear the indigenous people in Finland We have Sami people, which is only one of the indigenous people in the whole Europe. They have a lot of ways how to stay in touch with the nature. They have a lot of teachers, but because of the structure that has made all of the capitalistic ways of being in this world and colonialistic ways, we're not hearing them. We're not hearing what we could have heard. And now it's the last moments to really act and hear. Because I think the climate movement, it's not only a climate movement, it's a civil rights movement as well. I'm sorry, civil rights movement as well. So, I have a few minutes left, so I'm going to tell you fast that Elokapina have 3 demands. One is tell the truth. This is for the state that they must tell truth by declaring a climate and ecological emergency, by communicating and cooperating with other institutions, the urgency of change. The second one, act now. The state must act now and stop the loss of biodiversity and reduce net greenhouse gas emissions to 0 by 2025. I know that this might sound very unrealistic, but as we know, we have no time for, as they say in India, they're going to do it 2070. We have no time for that. I'm sorry, but we're too late. We have to act now. And even as we know, it might sound like it's impossible, it's getting more impossible every day. Every day that we are still in this world where nothing happens, it's getting closer and closer. 2025 is soon tomorrow. And our third demand is citizens' assembly. The states needs to create a citizens' assembly which focuses on climate and ecology crisis and policy decisions related to the crisis. I have wondered what this really means, and I think that this is a way to have faster political decisions, that there could be more like origins that could work with the politicians, that we could have straight actions to really make more faster actions in this part we are in. And also there has been shown from Ireland that this has been an effective way in the politics. And last minutes of my speech I'm gonna use for talking about this thing as civil disobedience, because I know that many might have a lot of opinions about that, and I want to say my words of it. So, as we heard before, we need in democracy many kinds of ways to act. And I'm not talking about me as a worker or me as in some institutes. I'm talking me as a Finnish human. We are in this system where its structures are on a colonialistic base, and all these ways that we are working here with traditional strategies, we are petitioning, lobbying, voting, and having these legal protestings. They haven't worked to the rooted interests of political economic forces. So I think it's not such a surprise that individuals has decided use non-violent civil disobedience. Because otherwise we're going to be part of the system and we cannot do anything about it. We can't. Maybe you might have the same feeling as I do, that my voice is not heard. But according to research, it's the most effective way to do civil disobedience. It's one of the effective ways to make a change in the politics outside the parliamentary. So non-violence civil disobedience is an important tool in the democracy toolpack. It is a voice from people giving pressure and amendments to authorities and decision makers to act in the ways of needed. This movement facilitates activities where individuals may use this tool. And to say here also, as we talked about before, we wouldn't have these rights for human and non-heterosexuals being in the way we are in this world right now if there was no civil disobedience. This is in Finland and all over the world. Check Gandhi or whoever, you will find a lot about this. It's not only right now in the world, this is in the history. So, if you want to learn more about the movement, you can come to talk to me. Maybe we'll talk more about this in the panel. Maybe my last word is here to, I want to see all of you that you get your power and you realize that we can all work with this stuff and we don't have to have these ideas that we are in a fight with each other, but we are doing this as a collective together. Thank you.
Amazing. So I think, at least to what it sounded like to me, today we have been talking about behavior, we are talking about mindset shifts, we have been discussing maybe the role of individuals, if I'm not completely mistaken, and now I feel like it might be our jobs to kind of change those mindsets and kind of convince these individuals to maybe do something. I assume a lot of people are already doing a lot. So I think, Sara, you had this perfect sentence there, turning anxiety into action. So maybe I'll start with that. How did you end up doing what you do? How did you end up turning anxiety into action?
That's good.
This one.
That's a good question. I actually ended up in politics via student activism here in Aalto University. So my background is here in the student movement and sort of changing the world for better for students and supporting or protecting education. But obviously on the side, there's always been sort of environmentalism and climate activism as well. And but it was my path to sort of see that, how would I say it, politicians are just normal people. So sort of I used to work with lobbying politicians, trying to tell them what kind of decisions they need to make. And that kind of taught me that, well, they're just ordinary people, everyday people. Some are smart, some are something else. and sort of, if I'm here on this side of the table trying to tell them what they should decide, then why couldn't I be on the other side as well? Sort of doing the decisions that I think are necessary. So that was my path to sort of choosing politics as my way of changing.
Are you happy with that decision now?
Well, almost every day, but there are some moments that I would change. But yeah, I think I do agree with that. We're not in this together. I think the main responsibility for tackling climate change sits with politicians, and sort of it is our duty, even though it wouldn't be popular, even though people wouldn't want to do it or anything like that. We know it has to be done, and it's our duty to sort of use the power that we have for the good. But I don't feel that I'm in this alone. In the parliament sometimes it feels like it, because there's obviously a lot of opposing also to these actions, but seeing businesses grow with sustainable solutions, seeing people on the streets, seeing research being made and sort of researchers speaking up makes me feel like part of the movement as well, yeah. Which is it's a nice feeling for a politician.
Yeah. Niklas, do you agree with this statement that it's the role of the government to kind of take the leading act here?
Yes, of course, it's those who have the power to change things, they should have the ultimate responsibility to do so. But I would add that politics is always a reflection of society. And if society is not ready to change, politicians won't be ready to change. They won't have the. We've seen it so far. They're not going to take the lead here. Climate action. Politicians have never taken the lead when it comes to climate action. The pressure has always come from outside the political sphere. It's come from civil society. It's come from science. Increasingly from actually the business world as well. I've seen, I used to be a lobbyist like Sara as well, and I maybe to some extent still am, where I worked for civil society organizations trying to wake up politicians to change things. But 10 years ago or 15 years ago when I was doing that, I didn't get nothing changed because I didn't have the backing of thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people demanding the same things. That's starting to change right now. And I think one driver is actually business and especially since the 2018 report from the IPCC. When I used to go to meetings, I would be on the opposite side of the table from politicians, from businesses, and sort of saying that you need to do more. Now, more and more I see that I'm on the same side of the table with businesses demanding politicians to act. So the pressure is building on politicians, and if I'd have to name one sort of blocker, I talked a lot about what's blocking us, what's preventing us from taking action. Unfortunately, it's still the political sphere, but the ultimate reason why that's happening is that there's not enough pressure on them to change things. And where can that pressure come from? It comes from us, right?
Leia, do you want to continue there?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it comes from us.
And who is us in this? Us.
I would say that all of us, we should all be on the streets. I think it's unfair that Extinction Rebellion has got this face like mine, like we are all young people there standing and crying. It should be everyone on the streets, because that's how we make a change. And also, I would like to add here that the pressure also should come to the media to really have, because the the picture of the world we have is very much from the media that we are looking at. And if the media isn't talking about the situation, or the government isn't talking about the situation with the right words, then we're gonna have wrong image of the situation as well. So I would say that we should be everyone on the streets, and we should have media and government telling the truth. Thank you.
I would actually just continue on that. You can hold on to the mic.
Okay.
You said in your speech that you're a systems changer. So could you elaborate how do we change systems? I'm anxious to know, I would love to do it myself as well. So whose mind are you trying to change? Is it the individuals, is it the governments? We have Sara here trying to change Sara's mind, or is it more people in the audience? How do you see, if the question is, whose mind are you trying to change? Leia?
Mine.
Your own?
Yeah, it starts from my own mind. I think all our minds are kind of connected, and if I can find myself in a way that I can be present to people, and I can look at the things in a critical way, and can see the hard truth of the science, and really read about the stuff that are really making me feel ache. So then if I make the space for myself, I hope that other people see it as well, and have the same passion for do the work for themselves as well.
So individuals in the end?
No, I think it's everyone's in the collective world that they are changing their own minds also together. It's not only me that is changing my own system.
So it's a network effect.
Yeah, I think everything is connected. It's not only individuals, but as my point, it starts from me, and I'm trying to take it further.
Yeah, that's good. Rika, how does this sound to you? We're doing this mic juggling, that's good. So, whose mind are you trying to change, and do you agree with this Leia's opinion on this individual approach?
Yes, I do. I think it starts from me. And you have to say it starts from you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's the way we can make the change. But I really like this anxiety into action, and being on the streets, that we should all be on the streets. And I see here a link to entrepreneurial mindset. For example, if you take responsibility for your own action and you are eager to try again even through failures. And then I also see a link to radical creativity, that we are using all the means, all the ways to be creative, even radicalism in Aalto University. And I would like to tell you a little story, if I have time for that. My colleague from another university in Finland came to talk to me when I started in this position, head of radical creativity. And she was really interested in the news in Aalto University, and she was even a little bit afraid. And first she told me that, okay, you have this logo in Aalto University, this A, so you are anarchists. And now you are like creative radicals. So what is going on in the Aalto University? But I have to say that I am really proud of us. We can be anarchists, we can be radicals, and we could be on the streets together.
So Aalto University is an anarchist university, is that correct?
From my point of view, I don't know if
It represents the whole school, but that's perfect. I don't know, just like any mic you can find.
Yeah, I think that's a good point of view, and I think academia, like universities, science world, should be sort of challenging everyone else. That's sort of one of the core things to bring new thoughts and bring new ideas. I think it's also important to sort of, even though I'm saying that we have the responsibility, because I want to underline that as a politician, I can't hide anywhere. It's sort of my job to fix this. But I do think it's very important that everyone, each individual, has their own sort of way to contribute to tackling this crisis. Every Friday when I go to work to the Parliament House, I walk the stairs and there are activists on the stairs. And there's young people, Fridays for Future, school striking, but there's also climate grandparents. There's like grannies who are fighting for the future of their grandchildren and grandfathers, and so different kind of people with different backgrounds. But obviously it's not, I think like being on the streets is sort of also a mindset. So being on the streets can be also sort of founding your business to bring the solutions and putting the pressure on decision makers on different sort of ways, doing research that will help us tackle this crisis. So everyone can find their own sort of path to be a part of the solution.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, and I love this concept of kind of being on the streets, and it can mean kind of so many different things. So I think that's maybe, I don't know, Leah, if you find that kind of being actually on the streets, if that's somehow undermining your contribution.
No, we do need people actually on the street as well. I won't say.
Yeah, Rika, you mentioned entrepreneurship, and what I'm hearing in this conversation is kind of this: how do we get this anarchist, radical creativity mindset? And actually, Niklas, I would like to ask from you, kind of like, what do you think? What kind of leaders do we need right now to make these changes happen? For example, the net neutral emissions 2025. What kind of leaders are we looking for, and where can we find those?
If I know, we wouldn't be in this crisis. Yeah, tough question.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
They won't fall out of the sky, that's for sure. And I think we can all play a role, either become those leaders ourselves through, what we do for a living, where we're active. We don't all need to be, members of parliament. We can be other types of leaders as well. So I think maybe, the concept of leadership could be slightly broadened.
Definitely.
I think, we've been talking about how change starts from within ourselves, and that's probably what I wanted to say also in my presentation, that we need a mindset change. But then we also need to realize that we're social beings, and you can show leadership with the choices you make as well, and they tend to rub off to other people. We follow, what people who we respect, what they do, what kind of choices they make, how they talk, how they, dress, how they eat even. So definitely you can show, not everyone is set out to be maybe a politician or a business leader,
but we can all show some sort of leadership in taking climate action. And that you shouldn't consider climate action as something like, if you think about, there was this graph about reducing carbon footprints. And I strongly believe that we should understand what our carbon footprint is, and we need to know the consequences of our choices in terms of how much carbon emissions they cause. But you shouldn't reduce your carbon footprint because you're reducing your individual impact on a very global phenomenon. You should do it so that you can show that it's being done. It can be done, and others will follow. So you're setting an example for someone else that can also see that, okay, this person switched to a vegan diet. Why shouldn't I try it? It's not that bad. That person gave up flying. Why can't I live without that as well? I mean, you should think about. I love the way you kind of put you combine the individual level with a collective level. So think about those individual choices that you make as part of a collective movement or society. I don't know if that made sense.
So kind of being a role model, if I understood correctly. Sara, you had your finger up.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, both on an individual level, how everyone can be a leader in their own sort of community and show example, but it also works on a level of cities, for example, or a level of states. Someone, maybe Niklas mentioned like the common argument that it doesn't matter what we do in Finland because China has so high emissions anyway, or India has only committed to be carbon neutral by 2070, which is way too late. But it does matter what we do in Finland because we are the leaders of the states. We are the ones to show example, and others will follow. And maybe if they don't follow today, they will follow tomorrow or the day after that. So states can always make new decisions. India can make a new decision that will be better than the one they have made today. European Union can make new decisions. New decisions have to be made on that level, and we do need sort of forerunners, like for example Finland, to show the way. We do need cities. For example, Helsinki decided to stop giving out meat in their events. And then people are saying, like, what does that matter? It's a global phenomenon. What does it matter if Helsinki has meat on the table or not? It does matter, because it's an example for the rest of the cities. It brings a conversation. Why do actually cities need to buy meat? Why can't they have vegetarian food bought with public tax money? So it sort of sparks up the conversation, and first conversation is very frustrating and it's stupid. But then maybe some change will come, and that's how politics works as well. It's stupid at first, and then changes will happen.
Lea, do you want to say? You had your finger up.
Yeah. Thanks. I would like to talk about authorities here because we're in a world where there is a lot of authorities, and I have myself tried to kind of like I don't know how to say it in English. Romahduttaa. Collapse those images in my head that I have the power as a young woman to sit here and not to be any doctor or anything. I really have the empowerment in myself that I can sit here, and I think that's the way in like if we want to really have like welfare country, it should be that everybody would feel like they have power, that they are heard, and they have this sense of trusting themselves. And I think that doesn't always come from strong leaderships. That comes from different kind of structures where we are more kind of I don't know, that we have relied on each other and we trust on each other, and we have like give the trust to many people, not only to one but to all, and everybody has their own place and they have their own area where they seem and feel like they are trusted. And I feel like that's the way to feel like you are part of of the bigger movement or a society.
And do you feel like you have that right now? Or are you fighting for that?
Inside myself, yes, I'm fighting for that. What do I see? Why am I here?
But do you feel that in our society you have that kind of possibility to impact and kind of have an effect on the society in the ways that you described?
I think that comes from if you go in movements where it's a lot of people, but because as I know, power is with the people. And if there's a lot of people, you have power. So I feel more power when I'm around a lot of people. Yeah.
That makes sense. Niklas, did you want to continue here?
Yeah, I think we need to change narratives, basically, and that can happen in many ways, but one of the most dangerous and harmful narratives we have is that you have to give up things in order to take climate action. And that refers to the poll that Sara was showing, which wasn't finished, but maybe you got the point. That the question from the journalist was that, are you willing to sacrifice your living standards in order to take climate action? My question is, or what I'm trying to say is that taking climate action, it will improve our lives from today, not make it worse. If we're going to eat healthier food, if we're going to have more time to do the valuable things in life, if we're going to, our transport system will be a zero emission. Well, how can that be a sacrifice? That's a change to a better society than what we have today. And the most irresponsible thing decision makers and politicians can do is continue with this false narrative that our quality of life will decrease if we take climate action. And that's a very dangerous narrative. We'll definitely face a decrease in the quality of life if we don't take any action. But we need to build like a vision or a narrative of that we're actually we're taking climate action so that tomorrow we'll live a better life than we're living today. It might mean changing some things, but if you frame it as sacrifice and giving up, that's the wrong way. Change can happen, but it'll happen, change will be to something better than what we have today.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing point, and I feel like, I don't know, Rika, if you want to contribute kind of from your background, would be interesting to kind of hear, do you agree with this kind of idea of kind of that we have to change the narrative, and how do you feel that you're contributing to that discussion of changing the narrative?
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you're giving up for something, then there will be room for something new. If you don't give up on anything, then there is no room for new things. And I think this is the basics of creativity, that if our life is full and we are not missing anything, then we are okay and we are happy. But if there is time to think or time to do something else, then we can find out that, okay, maybe this is something that I've been looking for, but I didn't even realize myself that this is fun, for example. So I think that how do you think about challenges? How do you consider them? Are you afraid of them, or are you bold, or do you have the courage to face them? So I think this is very crucial in the narratives. That if we are curious and we want to create something new, then we are really good problem solvers. But if we don't see the problems, we don't solve them either. So this a positive negative discussion is a little bit difficult, but still I think that we need it, so that we shouldn't only shade away all the difficult or challenging things, but we should face them really boldly and think about what can we do with them, so they can be challenges for us, and they can be the start for the new.
Yeah, that's such an important point, and also changing narrative. This is something where I think politics has failed to paint the picture of the future that we could have. It's hard to describe what doesn't exist. We can't expect all people to be able to do it without any help from others. Some people can do it, or I think maybe in Aalto University there's a lot of people who actually can
imagine something that doesn't exist yet, but sort of we need the bigger sort of story here. Where are we going? What is the change that we're actually that we want to have in the world? It's not something that we sort of have to take because this crisis is hitting us and we sort of have to obey to it. No, it's something that we actually want to go towards. I do want to say, if we still have time, that I don't think the situation is as hopeless as maybe sometimes it feels. I couldn't do my job if I would have lost hope or if I would feel that nothing is happening in politics, because a lot of things is happening. There's lots of stuff happening on the global level, lots of disappointments as well from the India decision, for example, but there are still all the time commitments are being made on climate targets and cutting back emissions and climate funding. On the European Union level, all the time we're trying to build legislation that will sort of have an impact on all the member states of the EU. That it won't be perfect, but if it would be good enough, then it would have a huge impact. And on the Finnish level, there's constantly decisions being made to cut traffic emissions or to impact sort of how people are heating their homes with oil or something else. So a lot of stuff is happening, not fast enough, but sort of all changes are going first a little bit step by step, and then there will be the big change. And I have to believe in the big change that will come, but I do need the help of all of you.
This is like a communal question to everybody. Like, is there somebody who is not hopeful of the outcomes that we're going towards right now? Because I think we have proof to many directions, but we can do like a quick round, hopeful or not.
It doesn't matter. As long you don't need to be a pessimist or an optimist. You need to be on the side of the solutions, and that's the only thing that matters. Hopeful or not, we just have to do this.
Yeah, thank you. I would still like to say from the giving up here, very quick. As we are here in Finland, in university, we have a lot of great things in our lives, more than we need, and many of people around the world don't have any of those things, and because we have those things, they are dying in their countries because we have so large consumption. So I think this is very interesting discussion that we are talking here, that are we ready to give up, because we are talking about something that so many people don't even have in the world. So this is about human rights as well, that are we really so in ourselves that we can't give up on something, and then we see people dying on the other side of the planet. But yeah, I do have hope.
Rika, hopeful or not?
Yes, definitely. I think that there is hope. I would have worked in Aalto University if I thought elsewhere. Still, yes, like you were saying, that bit by bit, like we are doing good decisions and we are taking actions for a more sustainable future. But still, I have to be realistic and say that we are behind the schedule.
Quite a lot.
I agree.
Yeah. So now we would need a radical change towards our goals. And how to do that, how to speed up the change, I think would be the core question at the moment.
Definitely. We're 2 minutes over, but can I still have a few more minutes? Oh, yeah, we can go. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that we are behind, and as I said earlier in my presentation, I think it would have been nicer if we would have taken action when it was still climate change and not climate crisis. So we had that chance, but that moment has passed. So now it is urgent and more urgent than ever, and sort of there's no going back. But yeah, I agree that we are behind.
Okay. I actually love this kind of the lightning round idea where we can just go around and ask quick questions. So I'm going to try it again. So I have 2 questions in mind. I think we have time for both, so I'll just ask them one by one. The first thing is, Lea, you pointed out that the Extinction Rebellion would love to have is demanding carbon neutrality or neutral net emissions by 2025, right? So if we could just go around, and what would be the one thing that would have to change in order for that to happen? So 4 years, or more 3, to carbon net zero. Niklas, you can go first. But actually, we went this way last time, and we should go around. Maybe Sara can start actually. Oh, you already last? Okay. Just anybody who feels like they have an answer to this can start. Maybe Leah is.
Okay, I think this is part where politicians should make the decisions, but one idea that came to my mind is carbon taxes.
Yeah, we have been talking a lot about climate crisis tonight, but I think if you think about like the whole of the sustainability, like kokonaiskestävyys, I don't know the word in English, then we should think about like quite many other things as well. So I'm really worried about the material resources that we have on the planet, and I would like to see some solutions on that. For example, no plastic anymore. But I know that we are working on that in Aalto University, and maybe in the future we will have something to replace it.
So what is the one thing that would have to change for us to be carbon neutral in 3 years?
No plastic anymore.
No, but okay, roger that. I'm putting you on the spot.
I would love to have one. I don't think we're going to reach it by 2025. 2030 is probably still doable if we hurry up. My answer is maybe more like a philosophical one. If we have the right to pollute, shouldn't we be obligated to clean up after our mess? Maybe that, like think about the atmosphere, and that we already have too much carbon in the atmosphere. Do we really have the right to add more into that invisible dump site that we have up there? Or should we actually start thinking about not doing it anymore, and if we do it, always clean up after ourselves in some way or the other?
Yeah, I sort of hate to be repeating what Niklas said, that I think 2025 is not possible anymore, or maybe it would be if we would have a different political environment, but that won't change in 3 years, and if it changes in 3 years, then we're already in 2025, so the change is already late. But we still do need all the actions. We do need to put a price for coal and carbon. We do need to sort of make drastic changes with the way we move with traffic. We do need changes in agriculture, the way we support doing agriculture in Finland, how we use the money we get from the European Union to do that. There is a lot of stuff that needs to be done, and maybe we can then sort of already manage to do it by 2030, or even before, if sort of things start rolling faster. There's a lot of cities in Finland that have actually given out more ambitious targets than 2035, which is the government's target, and I think those are good examples of sort of, or they can kind of show the way within Finland, and that's a good thing. But as I said earlier, I would love for us to have sort of the on-off switch, and the one big decision that I could say, well, we'll do this, we'll ban cars, or we'll ban sort of burning or all fossil fuels starting tomorrow, or something like that. But there is no such one switch that would solve the problem. But we need all the actions.
Sounds logical. I agree. System change. Yeah. I think like we're slowly running out of time. Let's do like super quick one sentence round, because we have like, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 people here who are kind of hungry and inspired to kind of know what do they do when they leave here. So is there something you guys would like to share? Kind of like, what is the one thing that people should think about when they leave that door? Sara, you can now start.
Voting.
Yeah. Rika.
Take a bus home.
Leah.
Voting is not enough. Go on the streets.
Okay.
Yeah, all of the previous ones, but think about what's your superpower in terms of changing things. It can be some of the things that were mentioned, but it can be something completely else. And build your sort of individual activism on that foundation.
Perfect. Now we want to have like one or two questions from the audience. I think we have like 2 minutes, so if anything has come to your mind, would be great to hear some thoughts, if this made any sense. Yeah. Yeah. Any questions? There in front row. Can you shout or do you want the mic?
I can shout. If you can hear me.
Yeah, we can
Yes,
hear
we
you.
can. I have like many questions, but I think one of the big ones that I think like perhaps we haven't talked about much, but perhaps in a wider scope regarding climate action, how willing is the government or like the society in general to decolonize their practices in a sense that we can now use indigenous knowledge as well as one of our main sources for saving ourselves and for actually including this oppressed knowledge that has not been taken into account because of colonialism and capitalism, etc. Like how, for example, now in Finland, how willing is society to take Sami knowledge into account, for example, if anyone has.
Sorry, this will be Rika.
Yeah, I can try to answer. As in, like every question, there's a range of opinions within the government, with like between different parties. So I think there's like different opinions on this. I think in the society as a whole, we don't have enough knowledge. People don't know enough about the indigenous people, the history of Sami people, or the current state of Sami people. So maybe the first thing would be to sort of educate the society as a whole. But then obviously in a political level, I think it's so important that we sort of work towards or sort of try to build the cooperation between the decision makers in the government and the indigenous people. And in the Climate Act that we are actually making a legislation in the government, there is a new sort of structure for this cooperation and for this discussion, so that the Sami people can have their voices heard, and also obviously that the knowledge they have can be taken into account when planning for sort of policies changes. So that is something that is being made, but we'll see how it will pass when it goes through the political machine. But myself, I support it fully.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up. This is really important, and I've been talking about like creating new things this evening. So I wanted to comment on your comment. But yes, I kind of like guess or suggest that what you are talking about is like wisdom and like embodied knowledge. And the knowledge, like research-based knowledge I was talking about earlier, is a little bit different than that. But I really appreciate that wisdom and embodied knowledge, and I think that's something like living in harmony with nature is part of that. And quite many times when talking about like sustainability and sustainable future, we don't need to create everything like all over again, but we should look back as well. And like for example in Finland, like 50 years ago, quite many people were living in little farms in omavaraistalous. And actually this was like a model for circular economy, but we have forgotten it. And now we are living like totally differently. So why should we go a little bit back? And there's like really good advices and hints and tips for us in that. Thank you.
Did you want to say something still?
Yeah,
Quick one, yeah.
quick. Yeah, thank you for the question. It's super important that we talk about these things. I myself have read a lot about Sami people in Finland, and I know that the knowledge is going further all the time in Finland, but I feel that at the moment they are not heard enough, and I feel that we are losing the wisdom all the time, and we are not taking everything seriously enough. So I'm also worried about the same question, and I hope that the government is really trying to have the time to get into this wisdom.
We're trying to do it inside the government. We'll hope the government as a whole will support the cause.
Yeah.
That's perfect. That's a great way to end this. Oh, there was another question apparently. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yes,
Go for it.
I have one more. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you for this whole event. I learned so much more. There is one thing that I
still learn, it is that in media there is so much information about climate change, and there is a half who is saying that we should act, and then there is the other half who is saying that the situation is actually not that bad, and that people are overthinking, and that we shouldn't stress too much. So there was a slide, I think, in the second presentation, where it was like shown what actions that individuals can take would have the most effect on the climate change. So could you please show this slide once again, because I didn't manage to take a photo, and I want to know myself what would help the best, and what has the best effect.
There's going to be a recording of this whole thing, so then you can check double check it there. I'm not sure if we have the technical capabilities to show it now. But sorry, once more, what was your question? Just showing the slide, or was there something else?
Yeah, basically showing the slide.
Okay. Oh.
What was the individual action that we can take to have the most impact on the climate change?
Yeah, that is one. So if somebody is ready to elaborate on that.
Yeah. And are we talking about emissions or this kind of role model stuff, or just anything?
Well, just roles that an individual can take.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were options like eating less meat, or go vegetarian, and not taking any long distance flights. So what of all of those would hold the most?
Can I take this?
Going to the streets.
I will have to come back to this, that on these individual choices we're making. Yeah, I know it's important, and I'm being vegetarian, and I'm not flying, and all of this. But really, we are now in the situation where we have to rely that the politics are going to make huge decisions, and it's not about us individuals at the moment. So really, again, go on the streets.
Yeah.
There are, fully agree with Lea there, but you can go to Compensate's website or download their app and make a test where you can see where your carbon footprint comes from. So you can, and there are other sites where you can calculate the carbon footprint, then you understand the impact of your choices. But again, don't think about making those choices because you're just lowering your own personal carbon footprint. Think about what impact that will have on your friends, your family, and other people, so that you're showing that these things can be done. And that hopefully encourages you then to take the next step, which would be go to the streets, or the next step, which is voting, or it doesn't matter which one comes first. But individual action is just one part of the equation. I think it's necessary because otherwise the politicians won't have the guts to change those structures that need to be changed, because they won't see that people are already taking action. If they see, they're dependent on elections for getting elected. But in between elections, they looked at people and how people behave. If they don't see that people are taking action themselves, individually or collectively in other groups, they won't feel that pressure to start changing the laws and the structures of society. So think about individual action as a way to achieve larger change, not just to reduce your own carbon footprint. But if you need to reduce your carbon footprint, stop flying, eat more vegetarian food or plant-based food. Those are absolutely the biggest personal choices you can probably make.
We're 10 minutes over, so Sara, Rika, just quickly, if you have something to say, and then let's wrap it up.
Yeah, very quickly. I took the slide out, but Niklas already said also owning a car or using a car or changing your car to electric car if you have it, but bike more and take the bus and eat vegetarian and don't fly and buy renewable energy. So those are sort of the individual, but I totally agree with what Niklas said on why we need sort of the front runners, or the people who take individual actions, the communities that take action, the businesses that take actions, and sort of tell politicians, even the ones that are still questioning whether the issue is urgent or not. But also here again, I have to say that it's the politicians' responsibility to make sure that everyone is able to do those individual choices. So it should always be so that the most sustainable choice is the most easiest choice as well. So it should always be cheaper to buy vegetarian than to buy meat. It should be cheaper to take the bus and easier to take the bus than taking your own car. So this is kind of sort of the structural changes and the political decisions that we need to make so that the sustainable choices would be easy for everyone.
I would like to pick up this overthinking from your comment. Yes, that's what we are doing exactly. We are overthinking and not taking action from my point of view. But I think that it's not our fault. We are educated like that. I'm really sorry. We are educated not to be creative. We are educated not to take action. We are educated to overthink at the moment. And there's also like a need for change to that. And we need to think about, like as a university or as a society in Finland, even though we have quite good schooling in Finland, that what we are really doing and could we even have a change in that. Like our education is quite known and we are top leaders in the world in that, but still we should develop even, the diamond.
Perfect. I think now we're starting to approach the ending of this session. Thank you so much. We had a great time. Lea, Niklas, Sara, Rika. It was like I love the discussion. Hopefully you guys as well got something out of it. I think there was in the timetable there was like a 10-minute slot for like host ending, but I feel like being in the kind of company of such great thinkers and such great doers, I feel like I have very little to add. But maybe I can just say 2 years ago when I was getting into sustainability, I met this one person who said everything you do impacts the people around you, which is like it's a simple thing, but at least for me kind of realizing okay, if I start my own company, maybe that company won't become anything or it might become a huge thing, but the people around me who see me kind of pivot my whole career to a different direction also shows that example. So I think at least for me, that was something that I was inspired by. So maybe we can close on that note that we all have the superpowers. So let's go find those. Thank you so much.